Right. Hopefully we won't get any noises in the background if you can help it, folks. And like I say, so welcome all of you. Thanks for joining me today. I'm going to first of all answer some of the questions that some of you put already in advance on the comments on the Patron page, and then I'll open it up, and some of these things you might want to comment on or ask me more about, or you can ask any questions you like, whatever you like, towards the end. Right. So I'll first answer some of the questions that I've seen on the Patron pages, and give you my thoughts on some of those questions that you've asked. For that, because not everybody can join us all the time at the same time, because we're all over the world. So I'll try to make these at different times of days so that we can give everybody a chance to come in live. So quite some difficult questions actually some of you have asked, and most of them are actually obviously on prediction type of things, because I know you like a lot of the prediction stuff I do. So we're going to have a few of those. So the first question, which was a pretty big one, I'm not putting the names of each person this time, but the first question you asked is, will the USA split up? Okay. Now, this is an interesting question, really, because, I mean, in my predictions in 2019 or so, I said about there'll be a huge divide in America. I said America would be divided like between East and West. It would be like a complete split in America. And of course, what happened, of course, is American politics went into overdrive. We end up with a huge, bigger political split than ever before. So in some ways, I suppose I saw a split coming. But I think a lot of people think that, I don't know if Casey or someone predicted this as well, but there was some thought that California might actually split from the rest of the USA. And I don't know if the person that asked this question was thinking about that in particular. But I don't think there were, in our lifetimes, we're going to see anything like that happening. But I do feel in the coming period in America, there's going to be more and more division. In fact, this whole idea of division between people, unfortunately, I see as we come out of the coronavirus period, I'm seeing more and more of this division in the world. Biden has given and is giving a huge economic boost to the American economy. We're getting the same thing in the UK, where they're going to give it, I have given already, but are going to give stimulus packages. And this will be happening all over the world. But this won't solve all the problems that we're going to have in the world. I see it. I was kind of tuning into this beforehand. I was trying to see what was going to happen. And I saw like a straw fire. Sometimes I see things in images and you think, well, a straw fire, it burns quickly. It gives a lot of light, but if it's not substantial enough, it doesn't ignite anything. It burns itself out. So I think we're going to see kind of worldwide a kind of a sudden boost. I think we're going to see the American economy particularly leap forward for a short period of time. But the problem is the consequence of this is going to be that it's also going to fall back again. So I'm seeing this sort of straw fire, as I'm calling it. And although in America now, we kind of have a new mindset that's almost socialist, in that it's trying to help the poor, it's trying to bring more focus on medical care and things like that again. But I think this is going to kind of go the opposite way to what is expected, because I'm seeing a bigger division than ever before between rich and poor. And we're already here in the UK seeing this too. We're seeing a huge division between those that have and those that don't have not, particularly when it comes to things like housing, and both in America and in the UK and in Europe, we're going to see so much unemployment. I mean, at the moment, everybody's kind of being kept at bay with things, but we're going to see such a big jump in unemployment that there's going to be an unbreachable division between rich and poor. And my feelings are that the way ahead soon is that we're going to see more and more social unrest, which is what I talked about way back, way back when the coronavirus first broke. And I see also, you know, we've seen here in the UK, if you're in America, you know, we've seen, for example, violence in Northern Ireland, which hasn't seen that scale for a long time, and violence in places like Bristol and things like this. And I feel that all around the world, there's this tension that's going to start coming out in fights in the street and things like that, you know. So I think we're going to say every small cause is going to become magnified. Every old cause is going to be kind of brought back on the surface, you know, like we see in places like Catalonia in Spain. We'll see, you know, division there. France, I see major upsets there in the coming months of this year, you know. So these are things I'm seeing, you know, like when I tried to tune into this, I'm seeing coming up quite soon for us now. It's coming to us quite soon. They call me a bit the prophet of doom and gloom sometimes, but I'm afraid it can, you know, when you start looking at any politics, it's pretty gloomy. Taxes will be going up. You know, I see a big hike in taxes, both in the UK and in America. They're all saying they're not going to put taxes up, and it's the worst thing you can do in a situation like this. But I see taxes coming in, particularly corporation type taxes on things like the Facebooks of this world, who are going to be hit really, really hard. We got 3 monopolies out there, or more, but with main monopolies are Google, Facebook, and Amazon. And you might remember some time ago, I spoke a lot about that, didn't I? About that they're going to be targeted in the coming years. And this is going back again, some years I started talking about that. So we're going to see that. So that's some of the main things on American stuff. Trump, who I predicted would have a second term, wrongly. I was kind of making those predictions before on the basis of a lot of what the Nadi had told me, and I'm not blaming the Nadi, because the Nadi says one thing, but I should use my own intuition as well with this. But I was thinking the same thing. But the Nadis now I've been told, are saying that Trump would be kind of a bit of a broken man from what happened. Nonetheless, I still, as I said in my earlier videos this year, I feel he's going to still be a very, very powerful force nonetheless. I don't think he'll become president again, but I think his influence will decide the next president. And I'll do something on that another time. So that's one question. So simple question, long answer. Another person asked, again on the Patron messages here, what will happen with the migrants at the USA border? And I see a similar solution ultimately happening, where the processing for migrants would have to be done elsewhere than just in America, because we've got the same problem here in the UK, and they're talking already about maybe if migrants cross the channel and are caught illegally, they're going to be taken somewhere else, such as Gibraltar or another any other British sort of province where we've got a lot of influence, and will be processed there, not in the country where they've landed. And Australians have done this, and I think America's going to have no choice but to do this. Biden is going to have a choice between either letting everybody in, which is going to be cause outrage to some people, or building the wall again, which is also going to cause outrage to some people. So my feeling is that there's going to be a sort of a zone they're going to make for processing of who's legitimately allowed in and who isn't, particularly those children, and what's going to happen with the children. I think some of those children will be given temporary citizenship, but I think Biden's going to have to be tougher on this, and I think that people are going to start saying, hey, this guy's almost doing the same as what Trump did. You know, what you say is one thing and you're doing the same as what everyone else has done. So there's going to be a lot of division and much more unrest in America as we come out of the coronavirus period, and people start to sort of have time to interact with one another. And we also had someone ask, someone from Finland, so we got all sorts of people in the patrons from all over the place, asking would there be an economic crash in the spring. And this is, like I said, I don't think so this spring, because I think we're going to get a boom. We're going to get a boost to everything. But I do think we're going to get some problems later on. And I'm going to come to that in a minute because one of the other questions further down. Going off on another tangent, someone's asked here, will there be an earthquake in Mexico? And I've said in my predictions this year, you might remember, that there's going to be problems all around the world, particularly with earthquakes and volcanoes this year. And shockingly, there's been an enormous amount of volcanic activity. We've had it in Guatemala, I think it was, isn't it? Iceland, Etna's gone up. There's been all sorts of earthquakes and things around the world, much more than normal, seriously much more than normal. So I hadn't tuned in specifically to say Mexico. So I said Japan is one of the predictions I made, that I said the Olympics are going to be stopped because of an earthquake. I still feel that will happen. You know, coronavirus could have been the thing I was seeing when I said way back that it would be stopped. But I still think as an earthquake, something's going to happen that's going to disrupt there. And I think there could easily be something in Mexico this year. It's one of those areas where we could have problems. Someone also asked, and this is a more UK-based type question. A few people actually have asked exactly the same question, actually. And they've asked, the SNP, Scottish National Party, are they on their way out? Someone asked. Now, the polls say at the moment that the Scottish National Party is more popular than ever and going to get a majority in the voting. And I expect that is the case. But I said before that apart from coronavirus, one of Boris Johnson's biggest headaches is going to be the SNP. And you might remember I also predicted this big clash between the fishes, between salmon and sturgeon, and the scandal it would cause. That did come about. You know, I said that would happen. I said there'd be this huge clash between the two of them, and it would reflect badly on Nicola Sturgeon. That's happened. So I also said that the Scottish National Party would rise high again, but would fade away slowly. And I think what's going to happen, I predict with that what's going to happen with them is it's going to fade away slowly. It's going to be something that will gradually, very slowly, gradually the polls will become less and less leaned towards leaving the UK, although the Scottish National Party will still, you know, continue as a strong force for a long time yet, but not necessarily with the aim of separating from the UK ultimately. Someone also asked, will the City of London retain its dominance in the financial sector? And this comes back to the earlier question about economic crashes and things. You'll remember, if you follow, you know, because you've probably followed me quite a lot, all you guys and the patrons, but you'll remember that right back, I said that that after we come out of Europe, there would be a boom to the British economy and particularly to the housing market. And we're kind of seeing a housing market boom now. This is talking quite a long way back. I said this. We're kind of seeing that. I also said that after this, there would also be much more discord in Europe than ever before. And I think we are seeing that happening. There is discord in Europe, particularly over the coronavirus, because they messed up on that, frankly. And there's, and you know, whoever's fault it was, you know, okay, whatever, they've had pretty serious divisions between them on that. So my thought is that my other prediction that I made at that time is that there would be a crash of some sort within the European Union, particularly with the euro. And I'm seeing also, I've commented before that I felt it would start in Italy. And I said that there would also be division in France. And ultimately, I won't go into full details, but because I've said it before many times, but I said about this idea of a German federation, Europe kind of splitting into two main parts, but divided, broken up into smaller bits as well. But there'll be center around Germany, a center around France, and the rest will start to dissipate. That's my understanding in time with that. So will the City of London retain its dominance? I feel it will, because it will be seen particularly as a safe haven for the future, particularly when people think about investing in Paris or Stuttgart, or Germany, Frankfurt and so forth. And those are my main ones. Someone also asked, will there be a rapture? I think I mentioned that one last time. So that might be a question I picked up before. That would be you know, I'll have to have a whole discussion about what we mean by things like that. Frankly, in my opinion, no. And there was also questions people were asking about other videos I can do, and also about spirits and things. I'll pick up one though, which I thought was quite interesting. Well, two actually, because one of you asked, it was your birthday recently, and you said that you started seeing things like coins all over the place. You kept finding coins, and you felt that they were kind of like a sign from the spirit world. And also another one of you said, when you light candles to the people in the spirit world, do the spirit people see this? So that's kind of a starting point for quite a long discussion about how the spirit world perceive this world, really, isn't it? And how much interaction can they have with it? And my thought is they do see us. So they can see us, but they don't see it in quite the same way as like being stood with us and walking next to us and seeing us when we're on the loo or anything like that, God forbid. But, you know, they are aware of us. But because the spirit world is kind of like a different place, it's a bit like they see us. I think as they see us, it's like we see things in our peripheral vision. They're aware of us, you know, they're conscious of us, and they're conscious of that we're sending a thought, a feeling. So if you're lighting a candle or something, the thing they would be most conscious of is the energy that you're sending to them, the thoughts. And we can perhaps talk about these sort of things if you want in a minute, guys. And the other thing people talk about, that one was the idea, you know, you find coins all the time. And people find like feathers and take that as a symbol, or as a reality. They think the spirit world have sent that, or they've sent a butterfly, or they've sent this. And I don't think the spirit world as such have this sort of ability to control our environment. Otherwise, they'd be able to move things more readily than they can. Otherwise, they'd probably be able to give much more physical signs, you know, in more dynamic ways than just coincidental things. But I would say that the nature of reality is such that sometimes we can get like strange synchronicities and strange sort of coincidences, and that it's not necessarily always caused by the spirit world, but that our spirit itself is causing some of those things to happen. So that the world that unfolds around us sometimes has very strange and specific symbolism, like auguries and signs and symbols, because the world is also influenced by our own thoughts and also perhaps by the thoughts of the spirit world. So coincidences happen, and they're one of the weirdest and hardest things to explain, because when they really happen to you, they mean something really significant. And I think that the world, you know, it's this kind of opens up a whole question of what is reality and how does it work. But I think that it's kind of like the spirit world don't materialize a coin as such, but kind of what happens is that we kind of end up in the right place at the right time. And it's just that our spirit is kind of synchronized in such a way that we see that thing, which is like a miraculous spiritual coincidence, which has meaning and purpose and significance to it. So those are my first thoughts, guys. Okay, I'm going to start opening it up to you now. I'm going to have to move over to my other screen just to let some more people in if they're late as well. And then you can start adding your comments as well. So I'm going to be switching screens a little bit here. If anybody would like to ask any questions, do feel free now. And I'll pick up on your questions and thoughts now.
Okay. Well, when you say the spirit world, they only see us peripherally. When I went to the spiritualist church for healing, the healer was also a medium, and she said she could see my husband walking in behind me. She could actually see him walking behind me. And when I sat in the chair, she said he had his hands on my shoulder. So presumably he must have been able to see me properly.
Yeah,
able to do that.
Yeah, I think it. Perhaps a bit. It's a perhaps when mediums see the spirit world, what we are seeing is we are seeing it inside our minds. The spirit world connect. Their mind connects with their spirit connects with my spirit, and my mind interprets it and hears it. And you know, and so some people that they kind of project it, so they see it. It's happening inside the medium's mind, but they project it and see it objectively, right? And just like some people might, for example, when you dream, you know, some people have dreams, and we all have the dreams internally. We know they're internal. Some people will wake up and the dream carries on in the room. They start seeing things projected outside themselves. That can happen, particularly when people get things such as sleep apnea and not sleep apnea. What's it called? When they can't move when they wake up. Sorry.
Oh yeah, no, sleep paralysis. Sleep
paralysis. Yeah, there's a word for it. I can't remember what it's called now.
Word for it.
And I think the same thing happens. Spirit can be seen is seen internally. You know, you get the spirit world. They connect mind to mind, and that's how we get the information. And I think for some people, they see it as a projection. So when they say, "Oh, they stood next to you," and I think a few mediums like to make it seem a little bit more exciting by saying that, you know, and I must admit I've done it sometimes, because, you know, your mother's with you now, I see her with you, you know, they're assuming that they're stood next to him, but I'm sensing and hearing it within oneself.
But the healer said she wasn't supposed to give me any kind of a reading, because she was only supposed to be doing healing. But she said it was so strong, and she asked me if I minded, and I said no. You know, but she said she wasn't really, strictly speaking, she wasn't supposed to give me a reading, but she did.
Yeah, that's because of the rules of spiritualism say that you're not allowed to mix healing and mediumship together. And she shouldn't do that, because when a person's doing healing, they should focus on the healing, and that people are discouraged from giving messages during those periods.
She said he was coming through so strongly that she felt she had to.
Yeah, so hopefully she would have stopped doing the healing and then went on and just did the clairvoyance, because you shouldn't mix the two.
As I was leaving, she spoke to another lady, and the other lady said, yes, I saw him as well. He was right behind her, walking.
Yeah, well, perhaps it was more important for you to get that information and that feeling, Pat. Yeah, really. I mean, that was more important for you at that point in time, perhaps, than having healing.
I think that was part of the healing, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, to know that my husband could.
Yeah.
I mean, he died. Yeah.
When you think about it, mediumship is also a form of healing, isn't it? Really?
Yes.
You know, I mean, when I think about why do I do mediumship? I think there's a few reasons one does mediumship. First of all, to help the bereaved, because, you know, what a weight it takes off when a person knows that life continues. And secondly, then, as also as a form of healing, because sometimes the spirit world will come through and help you with your life, for example, by giving a message that might take a huge weight off your mind, you know. And finally, I think the most important of all of them really is to give us to help us to understand the philosophy of that life continues beyond death. And I think, you know, this is, I think, is one of the most important, but one of the early stages of spiritual development, that we realize that life goes on, you know. But we mustn't stop there. We mustn't stop by just saying, life goes on. And this is where I find spiritualism gets a little bit lost, personally, because spiritualists can often be, I've noticed, become very, very complacent people, and become very complacent in their attitude, in thinking that, okay, yeah, good, after this life, it goes on. I've got nothing to worry about. I just go on. And that's great to be relaxed about it. But we're also here for a purpose, which is to, through suffering and through our contact with material world, to develop our own spirituality, you know, to learn, to grow. So we shouldn't just become complacent about the idea that there's life after death. We've got to say, that's marvelous, it goes on, but we must still work on ourselves and not fall into a spiritual form of complacency, which I think some do. So I'm not sure if we've got people still waiting. Have we waiting room? Yeah, I think everybody's in. Yeah, just letting the one last one. So yeah, so that's how I would say for that, Pat. If you like it, I don't know if any of the rest of you have any questions you'd like to ask on any topic at all, or any comments about some of the things I've made already.
Craig, it's Jane here. I was just I went to this museum the other day. It was on Egyptology. It was an exhibition on ancient Egypt, and I saw some mummies. And I mean, it sort of ended with the mummies. And then I felt like a guilt, like I shouldn't be seeing this. I mean, they were proper mummies from the tombs. And I just thought, well, you know, what about their spirit? I mean, they were put in those coffins or those, you know, in those tombs, and they've been removed. I mean, does that have an effect on people? Or is it just a physical thing and we should just not see the spiritual side of it anymore? It just seemed a bit...
I think on one level it's a bit it's not very nice, is it, to put a dead person on display, you know, and I know what you mean by that. And the same thing with other people from the past, you know, when we put the skeletons in the museums, or we put holy objects from burial mounds, very intimate, important things to the person, you know, who's been buried. But of course, you know, there's also, but that also connects us with history. So from our point of view, it's also a tremendous thing when we can see the past like that, and it connects us. And of course the spirit, even the Egyptians believed in the ka, which left the body, which is the spirit that leaves the body, and they had different views to us, of course. But the once the spirit's left, you know, all that remains of the body is there's a vibration left to it, which is just like the resonance that you would get from something such as when you hold an object, and you've held an object through your life, and it picks up your vibration, and the psychic can pick up the, you know, the psychometry, we call it, of that, and we can feel the vibration and tell the history of a person's life. But there's no consciousness there. The actual sense of being, the sense of self, has left that being, that body, you know, because it's a body, whether it be a mummy or whatever. So the spirit has left, and I still think we should just treat it with the sort of respect, because I mean, they were, I suppose the Egyptians recently, they had a big sort of thing where they put took all the bodies of various famous pharaohs, had to transport it from one museum to another place, and they made a huge fanfare of it. And I looked at that and thought, were they actually respecting the dead there, or were they sort of saying, hey, come to Egypt, this is a place to come for tourism, you know?
Yeah.
So it's always going to be a difficult question what we do with the remains of people, isn't it, really?
Yes.
But at the end of the day, it's just ash, you know.
Okay,
it's just
thanks
ash.
for that.
Yeah.
Can I ask another question? People, paraplegics, or, you know, the spine, you talked about a cure for cancer, but will people still sit in wheelchairs? Will there come a time when people get when they break their back or they break their spine, that actually is easy to repair? Or...
Well, my thoughts with that were, interesting enough, you know, I made that prediction about, I see something about a cure for cancer coming up. And I was now reading recently, it said that the advances we've made with this coronavirus stuff, where they put all this huge amount of research into it, they think now, they're saying that something's going to come out of that where there might be cures for other things, including cures for some forms of cancer, because they've gone so advanced with this idea, particularly with the one that uses what's called the RNA. That's not the DNA, it's like the communication part within the DNA. That the advances they found with this RNA research they've done now seems to be able to be applied to cancer. And I think with other things, I think we're going to see, there's a lot of fuss being made about stem cells. And I've always felt that ultimately we might be able to rejuvenate the body to quite an extent using stem cells. And, you know, obviously, I'm as you know from the books and things, I'm enormously interested in the teachings of India. Well, in the Indian ideas of the yugas, we live in the Kali Yuga at the moment. Human lifespan in the Kali Yuga is short, up to 100 years. But in they say that in the other yugas, with these like long periods of time, you know, and we're in the sort of a dark age yuga at the moment, and there's different other yugas, and as we go through the ones higher and higher, which are spiritually infused, like the age of truth, the Satya Yuga, people in those times, they say, can live 400 years and more. So, you know, according to the ancient teachings, which I hold a lot of stead by, the human is capable of living at least 400 years. And when you hear the stories of people like Babaji, Babaji Maha Avatar, who's in Yogananda's books, or you hear some of the stories about the Siddha yogis, these are some of the ones that spoke through the Nadi to me. You hear that they live for thousands of years. Maha Avatar yogi, I think, like, he's called different names. Most people call him just Guruji. He is supposed to have lived at least over 2,000 years, and it was actually one of the people that had direct contact with Jesus when he was here and set the mission. So there's all sorts of fascinating, and obviously you'd have to read it, and very contentious sort of ideas in this for some of us, but some very fascinating thoughts in the ancient texts, not just Indian texts, but also in other ones, where they talk about human life of extending very long periods of time. I mean, Moses was supposed to live 400 years, although they often had trouble counting the years in those days. But, so who knows what we're capable of doing with medicine? Maybe that'll be the way it'll go.
Okay.
Or even more so, actually, thinking about it, Jane, the things like our ability to heal, and Pat was talking about healing earlier on, but we also have incredible, when you start to really see healing and feel healing and experience healing, you realize there is this life force that the healer is able to transfer to you, or you as a healer are able to transfer to others. Or if you see in terms of the human aura around us, it's something that's, particularly when you see the aura, sometimes it's, it takes a bit of training, but when you suddenly see it and you think, wow, I can really see it, and it's not an optical effect, it really is there. You realize that we have a life force, and that life force, goodness knows what it's capable of doing if we learn to control it and enhance it.
Okay, thank you very much.
That's my thoughts.
Thank you.
Yeah. So anybody else want to share some thoughts or some ideas or any other comments on some of these things?
Yeah, when you say about the life force, have you ever done that with your hands, where you sort of hold them like that and you can actually feel something? It's almost like a magnetic force.
Yeah.
But they have now discovered a new force, haven't they, in the universe? It's turning physics upside down. They think they found a new force.
And they'll keep finding new forces all the time. Because I think, I mean, the thing they don't understand most in physics is what is consciousness. I mean, what is it? It's we know that it's more than awareness, and we also how much. I often say, can it be measurable? I probably have more consciousness, hopefully, than an ant. But an ant is conscious, and I am conscious, but we're conscious in kind of different quantities. And also, when I mean, when I was younger, I experimented with shrooms and all the rest of it. If your consciousness changes, you find that consciousness is something that is just not just being aware. It has all sorts of levels and of it. So we are a number of forces, including that healing force and including the auric force. And like you say, when you bring your hands together, I teach this a lot in circles, that if you imagine bringing your hands together, and you can try it if you like, but if you imagine like these are like two magnets, and the magnets will either attract or repel. Try bringing them together and you can push them away from each other. It's like you can feel almost like a negative force. They want to push away when you bring them and the closer you bring them, the more it wants to sort of almost fly behind your head. And then if you change your mindset and now want them to attract and have them get a visualization of them pulling together, you start to feel something that's more than a psychological thing. It's something that you can start to feel the energy tingle between the hands as they come close together, right? So that's one way I kind of teach people to start to what I would call sense the aura as opposed to see the aura. And when you then take your hands, in a group I would show this, but you can try this. You're going to keep your hands sort of clear from it when you do that. But then if you were to put your hands over a person and sense where it's pulling and where it's attracting, right? you can start to sense where they're ill. So if I've got someone in the circle who has a problem of some sort, and I say, if you don't mind, we're not going to diagnose like doctors, but if you'd like to sit down, we're going to see if we can sense what the illness is that you've been suffering from. And people put their hands over, you can tell where it is. And you can kind of diagnose, but you know, as healers, you're not supposed to diagnose, and mediums are not supposed to diagnose, but you can feel it, and you know where to put the energy. You see,
supposing you found something was, you know, thought something was really seriously wrong with somebody, I mean, what would you say?
And this is where you start to tread on very difficult moral ground, because obviously one would not want to terrify the person by making a diagnosis and saying, oh, I think you've got cancer. I mean, that's not going to be a very good thing to say to someone, particularly if you're wrong. But you might say, you know, I feel your energy there is weak. You know, if you ever go to the doctors, you might want to get that checked out, perhaps, you know. You've got to be so cautious. And this is why, you know, when this is why mediums as well need to be trained properly, as well as healers, because you know, things we say can have such a huge effect. And you see people that are not really properly trained as mediums and things saying outlandish things, which could affect that person all their lives, you know. I mean, a medium I know said to someone, you know, every marriage you have will break, you know, some gypsy reader, you know. And so that person is going to go into a marriage thinking it's going to break, and that the next marriage will also break. And some of these things you can make into self-fulfilling prophecies, you know. So these are sort of the moral issues that I think need always to be addressed with proper training. And I mean, spiritualism tries to address them in it's the way it trains mediums, because it's come across all of these things in its time. But you know, a lot of this is also being ignored completely, and I see and watch people giving demonstrations and things sometimes, and I'm horrified, you know, because you're not going to help that person, you know. And my teacher always said to me, if you see something bad in someone's life, you know, if you see something bad coming up, try to use your intuition and your clairvoyance to see further, because there's always something better usually along the line, you know, to give them some hope to move on forward, you know. And normally you can see something else as well, not just the crisis that they might have to deal with now, and understand them how they can get through it, and teach people that they can have free will to change that, and that you're not necessarily the victim of your fate.
It's very interesting.
I mean, I listened to, there was a really nice little talk I heard of somebody talking about Sai Baba, who, you know, I was also very interested in. And an astrologer went to see him and said to him, you know, he was a great astrologer. He studied all the books. He studied palmistry particularly. So he studied palmistry and astrology, which go very much hand in hand, literally in Indian thinking, you know. And he was he was a very advanced man in this. I don't remember his name, but it's all out there on the web somewhere. And he went to Sai Baba and said, you know, what is dominant in life? You know, is fate dominant? I mean, does fate, can we avoid and escape our fate? You know, are we bound by fate? And the kind of answer was, well, yeah, maybe we can change fate, etc., etc. But then Sai Baba put his hand on the astrologer's hand, and the astrologer looked at his hand, and all the lines in his hand, which he knew off by heart, were blank. It was just a blank palm. And he looked at his palm, and suddenly there was no destiny. You know, his palm was blank. It was just a blank piece of paper, sort of thing. And he was shocked. And Sai Baba said to him, if you put your faith in God, then all your fate is with God, and you need never fear or worry. And I thought, well, that's quite an interesting concept, that, you know, the power of the divine, whatever you want to call God. That's, I always find that's a difficult word, that word God, because it means so much to many people. But if you put your faith in the divinity, as it were, you're not necessarily in a person, but in a divinity, in the divine, as it were, and you trust and you run with that, then I think that in itself can overcome all fate, because you've become one with what in China they used to call the Tao, the center, the way, the path. You know, it's like you're on or the Dharma, as they would call it in Buddhism and Hinduism. You're one with that flow of existence.
Mm.
And I always think that that's what we try to do, you know, that what we're doing spiritually is that we're moving from a position of ignorance and darkness and confusion, but sometimes we kind of get to the point of equilibrium where we suddenly feel it's right, you know, like I mentioned about coincidences and synchronicities earlier on, about, you know, you're in the right place at the right time, you see that coin or whatever.
Yes.
It's like we get to what the Chinese called the Tao, that the central point, the point of equilibrium, and we all reach it. We can be in it permanently, but I think, you know, sometimes we reach it and then we fall away. We fall back into our silliness, our ignorance, our angers, our stupidities, you know. But every now and again we're in that awakened state. And I actually think this state that I'm describing here is higher than what you would call the enlightened state. You know, the enlightenment is a revelation of the fullness, the oneness, the absolute of existence, right? But we still come back into this world of form. So after enlightenment, we have to we live in that point of center, as it were, in that point of being in the perfect place at the perfect time with total perfection, which we can get to sometimes, and we fall away and we can come back again. But I think, but once a person has had the samadhi experience, or the highest experience, as it were, of awakening, then they can recognize that golden thread that goes through the maze, as it were, you know, the thread of the that was set through the Minotaur's maze, that there's a flow, you know, a cosmic flow that we can find as our point of focus.
Do you think Sai Baba has achieved?
Oh, don't go off, don't I? Sorry.
Yeah, do you actually think Sai Baba's achieved enlightenment?
Yeah, I you know, I mean, I think each person has to think about this very carefully, because, you know, there's some really heavy stuff out there about him. And I, you know, and people see that and think, oh my God, Craig, how can you follow a guy like that? But you have to follow what your own knowledge, inner knowledge says. I mean, I'm convinced that he is what he says he is because of what I found when I just met him in dreams, you know, and it was just overwhelming. And a skeptic will say, oh, that's just a bloody dream, Craig, you know, how can you hold with that, you know, that's just a dream, how can we believe you? And I say, you can't, you know, it's just what you understand to be true suddenly becomes true. And I'm no way am I a fanatic who would follow any guru, really. I've always believed in this idea that, you know, I mean, I love Sharavana too, who's a just fantastic guy that we've met, you know. And I met all sorts of holy people, but I still believe in the fact that, you know, that, like it says in spiritualism and in the principles, it says that we have to have a personal responsibility, you know. And I believe I should take in my life, and I think it's probably wise advice for most people, that we take personal responsibility for our life, that we understand that everything that happens to us, no matter how rotten it is our own fault. You know, it's our karma. And the good we do now will maybe affect our lives in future lives. And the bad we do now will also affect our lives in the future lives. And the negative things I've done in the past have been bad that might affect me now, you know, but it's my responsibility. And at the same time, although I take personal responsibility, I should also try to align that responsibility perhaps with, like I would call, the divine. You know, like I said about the Sai Baba said, it'll wipe the palm clean. You know, that's where I can call the Tao as well. Yeah, so those are my thoughts.
But can you actually affect your karma in this life? Can you?
Yes, I think you can. You're affecting your karma with every thought you have, every action you have, every word you speak, everything because we have will, don't we? And we have the will to be horrible, or we have the will to be good, don't we? We have you know, it's our choice. We're perfectly allowed to do whatever we like. But the thing is, whatever we're doing is sending out vibration that will come back to us in a like form, you know. So if we think good, do good, be good, and genuinely want to be nice to everybody, we end up actually being quite happy people, you know. But if you look at people that are miserable, they're quite often very selfish, you know, in my opinion. You know, I mean, okay, yes, we do encounter things in life that can make our lives feel miserable, and we can all get down sometimes. But those that have a consistent negativity are often very selfish person that thinks that the world's got to give them a free ride.
Yeah.
And actually, you only get out what you put in. Oh, there we go. I think we solved it all, guys. Sorted it all out. Yeah. So I don't know if you've got any other thoughts, anyone. It's like, I don't know how we're doing on time. Yeah, I'll have to do the last question, if any, from you. Anyone else?
Yeah, could I ask a question, please?
Yeah, sure.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Craig. I've had an experience before where I've heard spirit, but when I started to hear at the beginning, it sounded to me like the voice was down a very long tunnel, and it was really difficult to understand, and the message kind of changed, and then it became quite clear. And I just wonder what your thoughts on that are. Have you experienced that before?
Well, it's a bit like same as if you see something visually too. Sometimes it's in focus or not in focus and so forth, because I think a lot of people make the mistake that they think that the communication with spirit is absolutely clear. You know, like I was talking to a fairly skeptical person, you know, whose work I admire as a writer, for example, and he was saying, oh, well, you're either in communication with spirit or you're not. So you should be able to tell us this, 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 and this, you know. And I said, well, it's not as easy as that, I'm afraid. It doesn't work quite like that. It's like, I'd often describe it as through like the biblical phrase, I think Paul said, which is it's like through a glass darkly. It's like we see in a mirror darkly. We can only see part of it, and it's the same if you're hearing it auditorily. It's being influenced in your mind, and you will, because you're not hearing it with your ears in the same way, although you might appear to hear it in your ears. You're hearing it in your head, you know. And you know, like I say, some people see the person stood in front of them. It might appear to be stood in front, but it's still a mental picture. This whole world around us is just a mental picture we've constructed. So all I think with that really is that it's a question that, you know, it's not completely clear to you yet, you know, and that's fine, because all of us have been practicing as medium all our lives. For example, we don't always hear it 100% clear, you know. Sometimes you can, like, for example, if I'm working on a stage, I will hear it very clear indeed, because the energy is so powerful, because you've got all those people projecting their focus and their thought and their energy and their awareness and their consciousness onto you, that it kind of gives you a huge amount of ability, because, you know, you're not reliant on your own energy. What you're describing is probably happening when you're relying just on your own energy, or you and the person sat with you if you're working with someone. So I always say to mediums, when they first have to go out onto a platform to do a demonstration, is that once you get out there, it's the easiest place to work. It's easy to work when you've got all that energy, even though you might be scared to death. You know, it's still the amount of energy that comes through. So yeah, I would say the way you're hearing it is just the fact that it's a little bit clouded at the moment. You know, the spirit is giving the message to you, but you might not be hearing it clearly. And it's also of course difficult to know sometimes, particularly when people get started, to distinguish between what's being given from the spirit world and what's coming from our own thoughts, you know. And that'll always be the case, because we got to learn to distinguish between, you know, is that my thought? Am I just thinking that because I'd like it to be, or has spirit told me that, you know? And that's something you only learn through practice. You begin to recognize that the spirit thought, as it were, is different to the thoughts of your own thoughts. Sound like a schizophrenic. Okay, well, I'm going to have to leave it there. So thanks for all joining us today, and thank you all of you individually. Thank you for being patrons, you know, including the patrons that are going to watch this later, because, you know, what you're doing is helping us to do these things, helping us also with the center, which we've been looking at. Actually, we've been looking at places, but we suddenly realized the place we were after, the guy seems a bit greedy, so we might have to change again. But we found a really old, great listed building, you know, but we'll see how it goes. we hope to have some of that sorted out soon. But, you know, thanks all of you for supporting this and me and Jane and our work and the rest of it.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, Craig.
See you
Thank
soon.
you very
Cheers, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Bye for now then. Thank you.
Bye.
My wife Jane and I do our public work for free. We raise money through the theatres to raise money for our Hamilton Parker Foundation. This is a not-for-profit company that is soon to be registered as a charity. Now, our work is going in to help with the objectives of this charity, but you can help us as well by becoming what we call a patron of this channel. Now, as a patron, you'll get, first of all sorts of really interesting benefits. You'll have a sort of behind the scenes look at what goes on with our work. You'll get videos before other people. You'll get new videos. You'll get all sorts of benefits that are explained in the patron website, and it has various tiers that you can subscribe to. So you can subscribe to just a little bit and get a few benefits, or you can subscribe a lot and get a lot of benefits. And what this means is that we can raise some money through this channel. Now, this money's not going to me and Jane to give us a fancy lifestyle. This money is going into our foundation that has some fantastic objectives. Now, the first thing we want to do with the foundation is, first of all, get a cyber center together, a cyber temple, as it were, a place where we can introduce new people to you through this channel. So by supporting this channel and giving something to the as a patron, you will find that this channel will start to get better and better content with more and more interesting things going on. We'll be able to get the cameras, we'll be able to have the space, we'll be able to have the right setting where we can build the energy to do things such as mediumistic circles and so forth online. But also our work extends further than that, because we are hoping ultimately to build a spiritual center, a psychic ashram, as it were, where people like you can come to visit and take part in an interactive way through this channel as well. But also we are doing a lot of what we call spiritual service. We are going out and giving a large part of the income we generate to people in India who are destitute. We've given to schools, we've fed children that are in need, we've helped mentally handicapped people, we've given cows to old people in India. Some of all this you'd have seen in my movie Mystic Journey to India on Amazon. But all of this is part of our mission, part of our remit to help the world. Because we're not only trying to find our divine nature, we're also trying to live what we learn and express it in ways that are really beneficial to the world. So if you follow this channel, but more importantly, if you become a patron of this channel, you can help us to take this whole mission onto a much higher level than any psychic work has ever been done before.